She was found in a valley in Norway, burned.
Positioned with almost surgical precision, arms crossed over her chest, legs straight, like someone had arranged her after death. Around her, the remnants of a fire, melted rubber, shattered glass from what had been a bottle of liquor, and 70 sleeping pills, dissolved, consumed, or scattered across the blackened ground. She had no name, no identification, no fingerprints, because someone had burned them off. It has been over 50 years, and we still don't know who she was. This is the story of the Isdal Woman, Norway's deepest secret, one of the most baffling cold cases in European history. A woman who traveled across an entire continent under at least 8 different identities, and then vanished into a valley with her past deliberately erased. Some say she was a spy. Some say she was murdered. Some say the Norwegian government knows exactly who she was and chose silence. My name is Andrew, and you're watching Dark Lens. Stay with me, because this one goes very, very deep. Bergen, Norway, a port city on the western coast, surrounded by 7 mountains. It's a beautiful place. Old wooden houses painted in faded reds and yellows, fishing boats in the harbor, mist that rolls in from the North Sea and refuses to leave. In late November 1970, the mountains around Bergen were already deep into winter. Cold, quiet, the kind of quiet that makes sounds feel wrong when they happen. On November 29th, a professor named Finn Lier was hiking through Isdalen, Ice Valley, with his 2 young daughters. It was a Sunday, a family walk. Normal. Then they smelled it. Burning. Not campfire burning. Something else. They followed the smell through the trees, and in a clearing, a shallow depression in the valley floor, they found her. A woman, lying on her back, arms folded across her chest. She was on fire. The professor pulled his daughters away and ran to find help. Police arrived within the hour. What they found was unlike anything they had seen. The woman was badly burned, but not entirely. Portions of her body, particularly her torso, remained intact enough for examination. She was lying in an almost ritualistic position, deliberately arranged. That was the first thing that struck investigators. The second thing, the fire around her was intentional, fueled by accelerant. Someone, or she herself, had wanted this fire to burn. Police cordoned off the valley and began their work. They found a melted plastic bottle, later identified as having contained liquor, remnants of clothing, a small collection of objects nearby, scattered as if dropped, and the pills, 70 sleeping pills. Later analysis confirmed they were phenobarbital, a powerful barbiturate. Some dissolved, some intact. They were everywhere around her body. The medical examiner's report would later conclude she had ingested a large quantity of the pills before, or as, the fire began. Whether she was alive when the fire started remained unclear. But here is what was immediately, unmistakably clear to the investigators standing in that valley. Someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure this woman could not be identified. Her fingerprints had been removed, burned away, or physically abraded. The report was not specific. Her clothing labels had been cut out, every single one. There was nothing on or near her body that bore a name, a number, or a country of origin. She had been deliberately, systematically erased. The police took her to the Bergen morgue, and the mystery of the Isdal Woman began. The autopsy was performed at the University of Bergen's forensic department. The pathologist's findings were, in many ways, more disturbing than the scene itself. The woman was estimated to be between 25 and 40 years old, medium height, approximately 168 centimeters, or 5 feet 6 inches. Dark hair, dark eyes, an athletic build, suggesting someone physically active. She was not Norwegian. That much was clear almost immediately. Her bone structure, dental work, and physical characteristics pointed towards Southern or Eastern European origin. Some analysts later suggested she could have been from French-speaking Belgium, France, or possibly further east. The dental examination was particularly interesting. Her teeth showed evidence of high-quality dental work, not cheap, not rushed. Someone had paid for good care over many years. This was a woman of means, or at minimum, someone who had access to professional medical and dental resources. Now, the fingerprints. This is where things became deeply strange. When forensic technicians attempted to take fingerprints from the body, they discovered the fingertips had been burned or treated in a way that made clean prints nearly impossible. This was not accidental fire damage. The burns were localized specifically to the fingertip pads. Someone had deliberately destroyed her fingerprints. In 1970, fingerprinting was one of very few reliable identification methods. There was no DNA profiling, no facial recognition, no digital databases. If your fingerprints were gone and you carried no identification, you were, effectively, a ghost. Whoever erased this woman's identity knew exactly what they were doing. The cause of death was officially ruled as a combination of acute phenobarbital poisoning, inhalation of toxic fumes from the fire, and burns. In other words, she was poisoned with sleeping pills and then burned. Whether she was conscious when the fire started, whether she started it herself, whether someone else did, the investigation could not conclusively determine. The official verdict, undetermined, possibly suicide, possibly homicide. Possibly. That word would haunt this case for decades. Police released a description to Norwegian media. They reached out to Interpol. They published photographs, artistic reconstructions, careful to balance dignity with utility. No one came forward to identify her. Not a family member, not a friend, not a colleague. In a country of under 4 million people in 1970, a dark-haired foreign woman traveling alone should have been noticed, remembered, recognized. And she had been, by many people, but no one knew her name. While detectives were processing the body in the Bergen morgue, another discovery was being made across the city. At Bergen's main railway station, the terminus of the famous Bergensbanen line, workers were going through the luggage storage lockers as part of a routine clearance. In 2 separate lockers, they found 2 suitcases. The suitcases were brought to police. When detectives opened them, what they found confirmed their worst suspicions about the woman in the valley. These were her bags, and they told a story. Inside the suitcases, investigators found a collection of items that painted an extraordinary portrait. Clothing, expensive, high quality, from multiple European countries. French labels, German labels, Belgian. The clothing had been purchased across the continent, as if the woman had been shopping specifically to avoid a single point of origin. Wigs, multiple wigs. Different colors, different styles. Glasses, multiple pairs, some with plain glass, not prescription. Disguise glasses. Cosmetics, high-end. Again, from multiple countries. A notebook, filled with cryptic notations, numbers, city names, abbreviations, written in a shorthand that investigators could not immediately decode. And the documents. This is where the case became international. Among her belongings, investigators found evidence of multiple identities. She had traveled using at least 8 different names. 8. Across Norway, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, France, the United Kingdom, and possibly more. Some of the names she used: Claudia Tielt, Vera Jarl, Genevieve Lancier, Alexia Zarnamerchis, Elizabeth Lienhauer. These were not variations on a single name. These were completely different identities, different nationalities, different backstories, different papers. Investigators began reconstructing her movements. Bergen, Oslo, Stavanger, then back to Bergen, but also Frankfurt, Geneva, Brussels, London, Amsterdam. She had been moving across Europe systematically, methodically, for at least 2 years before her death. Why? A tourist doesn't travel under 8 names. A criminal might, but criminals usually have a motive that explains their movement. A businessperson doesn't need wigs and fake glasses. There was one profession, one very specific world, where this kind of tradecraft made sense. Intelligence. Before we get to the spy theories, and we will get there, I want to spend some time on the human being. Because in cases like this, it's easy to get lost in the mystery and forget that there was a woman. A real woman. Someone's daughter. Perhaps someone's mother. A person who, whatever she was doing, was alive and moving through the world and is now gone. What do we actually know about who she was? We know she was educated. The coding system in her notebook, while not immediately legible to Norwegian police, suggested someone with training in systematic notation, possibly academic, possibly professional, possibly intelligence-related. We know she was seen in Bergen in the weeks before her death. Hotel Hordeheimen. She checked in under one name. Hotel Neptun, a different name. Several people remembered her. A woman who sat alone at dinner, who declined conversation, who left early in the mornings and returned late, who sometimes appeared nervous, who once asked a hotel clerk if anyone had been asking about her. If anyone had been asking about her. That phrase was remembered by the hotel clerk for decades. She had published it in her memoirs. She never forgot the look on the woman's face when she asked it. Not paranoid, not hysterical, quiet, controlled, but afraid. We know she ate alone in Bergen's restaurants, that she ordered wine, that she sat by windows, that she read, though what she read, no one could say. We know that in her final days, she purchased a one-way bus ticket into the mountains near Isdalen, a ticket to a place hikers went, a place that, in late November, in the cold and the dark, no one would be going. And we know she never came back. Investigators worked the case hard in the months after her death. They circulated her description across European police forces. They sent the decoded fragments of her notebook to linguistic experts. They traced her hotel stays across the continent. They found trails, but every trail ended in a wall. Each identity she had used was a dead end, a name that appeared in hotel registers and then simply ceased to exist. No origins, no documents that traced back to a real person. Ghost identities, all of them. After several years of investigation, the Bergen police officially shelved the case. Unidentified, unknown, unsolved. The Isdal woman was buried in a lead coffin, so that if she ever needed to be exhumed, her remains would be preserved in a Catholic section of Bergen's Melendal Cemetery. Her gravestone reads, Ukjent Kvinn, unknown woman. 1970. Let me put that date into context for a moment. In 1970, the Cold War was not an abstraction. It was a living, breathing reality in Europe. NATO and the Warsaw Pact faced each other across a divided continent. Norway, a NATO member, was geographically critical. It shared a land border with the Soviet Union. Its fjords and ports were strategically vital for both submarine warfare and surveillance. Bergen itself was home to NATO's Northern Command, military installations, naval bases, classified operations. For intelligence services on both sides of the Iron Curtain, Norway was prime territory. KGB officers, CIA assets, MI6 agents, East German Stasi operatives. They moved through Scandinavian cities undercover, gathering information, running networks, meeting contacts. And a woman traveling under 8 aliases, with wigs and fake glasses and a coded notebook across the same continent those agencies operated on, in and out of a strategically sensitive NATO city, does not fit the profile of a tourist. Here is what investigators and later journalists pieced together about the spy theory. The movement pattern. Her route through Europe matched corridors commonly used by Cold War intelligence operatives, not tourist routes, but transit hubs between cities where handler meetings would have been plausible. Geneva, Brussels, Frankfurt, Bergen. These were not random stops. The tradecraft, 8 aliases. Cash only. Clothing from multiple countries to obscure origin. Wigs and fake glasses for physical disguise. A coded personal notation system. This is not amateur behavior. This is trained behavior. Trained by someone. The notebook. When Norwegian police finally decoded significant portions of her notebook, a process that took years, they found what appeared to be a record of meetings, locations, and contacts. Not in a language, in a personal shorthand. Numbers that corresponded to dates. Letters that may have been initials. City codes. The question she asked, has anyone been asking about me? That is a question from someone who expected surveillance. From someone who was afraid of being followed. From someone who knew what it meant to be hunted. Now, which side was she on? This is where theories diverge. Some researchers believe she was a Western agent, NATO, CIA, or one of the Scandinavian intelligence services, who had been burned, identified by the Soviets or by a mole within her own organization, and that her death was not suicide but assassination, staged to look like suicide. The staging element is critical. That ritualistic positioning of the body, arms crossed, legs straight, That is not how someone collapses from a pill overdose and a fire. That is someone placed, arranged, after death. Other researchers believe she was a Soviet or East German asset, working for the KGB or the Stasi, who had either outlived her usefulness or been compromised, and that her own handlers had eliminated her to protect the network. There is a third theory, darker still, that she was a double agent, working for two sides simultaneously, and that when one side discovered the arrangement, they decided the safest resolution was permanent. We do not know which theory is correct. What we know is that Norwegian authorities did not pursue the intelligence angle aggressively, and that, according to some investigators who later spoke to journalists, they were told not to. In 2016, the Norwegian public broadcaster NRK launched a major investigative project into the Isdal Woman case. They called it Isdalskvinnen. And what they found was troubling. NRK journalists interviewed retired police officers, former intelligence officials, hotel workers who had encountered the woman, and forensic experts. They obtained previously classified documents. They commissioned new forensic analysis. And several things emerged that had never been made public. First, the Norwegian Police Security Service, PST, the domestic intelligence agency, had been involved in the original investigation from very early on. This was not publicly known. In 1970, the narrative presented to the public was that this was a standard police investigation into an unidentified body. But PST, Norway's equivalent of MI5 or the FBI's counterintelligence division, had their people in Bergen almost immediately after the body was found. Why would domestic intelligence be involved in what was ostensibly an unidentified body case, unless they had reason to believe the body was intelligence-related? Second, several pieces of evidence had gone missing from the official case files. Third, a retired Bergen police officer gave NRK a remarkable interview. He said, on record, that during the original investigation, detectives had developed strong leads suggesting the woman was connected to Cold War intelligence operations, and that they had been quietly advised by higher authorities to step back from those leads, to focus on the identification question, not the circumstances of death. He described it not as a dramatic suppression, no men in black, no direct threats, but as a quiet closing of doors, requests not made in writing, instructions given in hallways, not in memos. Asterisk, someone didn't want us to find out who she was. Asterisk, that was his quote. NRK broadcast it, and Norway listened. Fourth, and perhaps most significant, NRK discovered that in the days immediately following the discovery of the body, several foreign intelligence services had made inquiries with Norwegian authorities about the case. Which services? NRK was unable to confirm specific names, but the implication was clear. Someone outside Norway already knew or suspected who the Isdal Woman was, and they were checking, quietly, through diplomatic channels, on what Norway had found. Think about that. If the woman was truly a nobody, a random European tourist who had tragically died, no foreign intelligence service would care. They would not be making quiet inquiries through diplomatic back channels. They cared because they knew her, and they needed to know how much Norway knew. The NRK investigation did not solve the case, but it changed it. It transformed the Isdal Woman from a sad, strange local mystery into something with international dimensions, something that touched the highest levels of Cold War Europe. And it prompted the Bergen police to do something that, 50 years ago, was impossible. In 2017, Norwegian authorities, motivated in part by the NRK project and the renewed public interest, authorized a new forensic investigation of the Isdal Woman's remains. She had been buried in that lead coffin since 1971, almost 50 years. Because of the lead, her remains were exceptionally well preserved. A team of forensic scientists from the University of Bergen, working with international partners, conducted the most advanced analysis ever performed on the case. They extracted DNA. They analyzed her teeth, specifically the isotope ratios in her dental enamel, which can indicate where a person grew up because the water and food of different regions leave chemical signatures in the body. They studied her bone structure, and they ran her DNA profile against international databases. The isotope analysis produced a significant finding. The chemical signatures in her teeth suggested she had grown up, spent her formative years in the German-speaking world, Central Europe, possibly Germany, Austria, or German-speaking Switzerland. This was the first concrete geographical anchor the case had ever had. The DNA was entered into genealogical databases, the same kind of databases that have been used in recent years to solve cold cases across the United States and Europe by identifying relatives of unknown individuals. As of the most recent public updates, no confirmed match has been found, but the search continues. The isotope finding also gave renewed credibility to a specific theory that had been circulating among researchers for years. There are researchers, serious ones, with documented evidence, who believe the Isdal Woman may have been an operative connected to the East German Stasi. The Stasi, the Ministry for State Security of the German Democratic Republic, was one of the most comprehensive surveillance and intelligence operations in human history. At its peak, it employed over 90,000 full-time officers and nearly 200,000 informants. It ran agents across Western Europe, many of them under deep cover, assumed identities, false papers, lives constructed to be invisible. A German-speaking woman, trained tradecraft, multiple European aliases, operating in a NATO city. The profile fits, but the Stasi archives, partially opened after German reunification in 1990, have not produced a confirmed match for the Isdal Woman. Either her file was destroyed, the Stasi shredded millions of documents in the final days before the wall fell, or she was not Stasi, or she is in there under a name no one is yet connected to the case. In 2023, Norwegian authorities confirmed the investigation remains open. The DNA profile exists. The isotope data exists. The genealogical search continues. Somewhere in the world, there may be a family who lost a daughter, a sister, a cousin, who disappeared into Cold War Europe and never came back, who was told she had defected or died in an accident, or simply vanished, who never knew she was in a valley in Norway, who never knew she was buried under a stone that said only, unknown woman. The Isdal Woman has no name. After more than 50 years, after DNA analysis and isotope testing and investigative journalism and diplomatic inquiries, and a lead coffin and a mountain valley in Norway, she has no name. What she has is this. She was real. She was here. She moved across Europe with extraordinary skill and discipline, carrying secrets we may never know, serving purposes we may never understand. She sat alone in Bergen restaurants and looked out windows. She asked hotel clerks if anyone had been asking about her. She carried wigs and fake glasses in her suitcases. She wrote a coded notebook that still gives up its secrets slowly, reluctantly, like everything else about her. And on a cold November day in 1970, she walked, or was carried, into a valley called Ice Valley. And the world forgot her name, if it ever knew it. Until now. If you know something, if you have a grandmother or a great-aunt who vanished in Cold War Europe, who was never accounted for, who simply ceased, there is a DNA database. There is a case file. There is a forensic team that is still looking. Her name is waiting. If this video stayed with you, and I think it will, please subscribe to Dark Lens. Every case we cover is someone who deserves to be remembered. Every view tells the algorithm that these stories matter. The link is below. The next case is already in production. Until then,